Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
The introduction. In a quiet suburb nestled on the outskirts of St. Louis, Missouri, the town of Maplewood was just waking up. The sun began to peek through the branches of towering oaks lining the streets, casting dappled shadows on the early riser. It was an unremarkable Tuesday morning in late October, one that would soon be etched in the memories of its residents forever. The rhythmic sound of a newspaper being tossed onto the porch broke the early morning stillness. Inside the modest two-story house at the end of Maple Street, Ann Turner was brewing her morning coffee, a single mother of two. Her day was a meticulously choreographed routine of preparing breakfast and packing lunches before rushing the kids off to school. But that morning, an uneasy feeling gnawed at her. A peculiar silence hung in the air, one she couldn't quite shake. Across town, police officers were already on the scene. The normally serene Maplewood Park had transformed into a grim spectacle. Overnight, as shadows lengthened and crime scene tape fluttered like a warning flag in the cold breeze, a jogger, out for his usual morning run, had stumbled upon the Baudier young woman, lifeless and sprawled out among the fallen leaves, her vibrant red scarf contrasting starkly against the browning earth. Detectives arrived shortly after, the sight deepening the furrows etched into their brows. They understood the implications. A murder had taken place in their town, and the ripple effects would be felt far beyond the boundaries of Maplewood. As the first responders began their investigation, they unknowingly stepped into the intricate web of secrets the town had long kept under wraps, unleashing a chain of events that would leave no stone unturned and no heart untouched. The victim. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, details surrounding the victim began to unfold like pages in a carefully kept journal. She was identified as Rachel Monroe, a 24-year-old graduate student at the nearby state university, known for her bright smile and infectious laughter. A sociology major, with a curiosity about the darker complexities of human behavior, Rachel had dreams of one day influencing policy for social justice. The news traveled swiftly through Maplewood. Her neighbors described her as a quiet but warm presence, often seen walking a golden retriever, Daisy, around the neighborhood. Rachel found solace in the simplicity of life, enjoying cozy evenings filled with books and movies shared over steaming cups of herbal tea. But underneath that serene exterior, her life was riddled with personal battles that perhaps only her closest friends had witnessed. Among them was Lily, her college roommate and confidant. When contacted by the police, Lily's grief spilled over into disbelief. "This can't be happening," she whispered, covering her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. She remembered their late-night talks about ambitions and insecurities, and how Rachel was determined to fight for those who felt powerless. They had even discussed the potential dangers of activism, how one could become a target in a world too often indifferent to change. As investigators dug deeper into Rachel's life, they discovered unsettling fragments. Aside from her studies, she had recently become involved in raising awareness around local issues and effort to confront youth homelessness in Maplewood and the associated mental health crises. Friends recounted how passionate Rachel was about her cause. But as the detectives sought to learn more about her sphere of influence, they encountered whispers of discontent and veiled threats from shadows that loomed over her noble ambitions. That day, the detectives were not just investigating a crime. They were also peeling back the layers of a life cut short too soon, unraveling a tapestry woven with purpose, struggles, and a community's collective heartache. The crime scene, Maplewood Park, usually a serene enclave, had transformed into a tableau of chaos by the time the sun hung high in the sky. The air, once crisp and invigorating, now felt heavy with a foreboding atmosphere. Officers cordoned off the area, with yellow tape that flapped ominously in the breeze, forming an uncomfortable boundary between nature's beauty and the tragic reality that lay within. Detective Sarah Thompson scrutinized the scene, her keen eye noting every detail. A seasoned investigator whose resolve had been hardened by years of experience. She followed the constraints of procedure while allowing her instincts to guide. The body of Rachel Monroe lay amidst a cluster of autumn leaves, each rendering the scene eerily, picturesque yet horrifyingly. Floral arrangements and discarded candy wrappers haphazardly decorated the ground, remnants of a community left unaware of the violence that had shattered their peace. A forensic technician meticulously photographed the scene while another collected evidence. The victim's belongings, her phone, wallet, and a leather jacket remained intact, nestled beside her. They appeared undisturbed, which raised the troubling question. Was this a targeted attack, or something more random? A tragic intersection of life and death. As the technicians worked, Thompson's mind flickered through various scenarios. Rachel's scarf, bright red and now grimy, was slack around her neck, its fibers matted in the dirt. Clearly it had been more than a simple struggle. The brutality suggested a deeper animosity. She glanced back towards an area recently covered in fallen leaves, now disturbed and showing evidence of an altercation. The focused buzz of the investigative team could be heard around her. But the detective's thoughts drifted to the victim's life. Rachel had fought for others. She had turned her passion towards social issues. And yet, here she was, rendered voiceless. With every piece of evidence gathered, it became increasingly clear that this crime was no mere random act. It was fueled by a complex web of motivations that stoked the flames of a disquieting reality lurking beneath Maplewood's tranquil facade. Unbeknownst to the residents, their comfortable lives were setting the stage for a drama far darker than they could ever envision. The early investigation, with Rachel Monroe's body now transported to the county coroner's office, the focus of the investigation began to shift into high gear. Detective Thompson gathered with her team in a small conference room at the Maplewood Police Department, the walls plastered with photos of the victim taken at various stages of her life. Each image seemed to pulse with vibrancy that stood in stark contrast to the grim reality they now faced. "Okay, everyone," Thompson began, her voice steady and authoritative. "We have a young woman dead in a supposedly safe community. We need to piece together her last movements and the people she interacted with. Let's start with her digital footprint." A tech analyst powered on a laptop and pulled up Rachel's social media accounts. Her online presence was robust, filled with photographs of campus life, activist events, and moments shared with friends. But there lay a troubling undercurrent. Posts indicating strained friendships and heated debates about her activism appeared increasingly frequent. It was clear that she had dealt with backlash from those against her causes. Critical comments from anonymous profiles had peppered her posts, echoing a sentiment Thompson knew all too well. Standing up often meant facing death. As the team dissected her online interactions, Officer Mark Chen began reaching out to her close friends and acquaintances. He knew that speaking on behalf of the dead could sometimes yield unsettling truths. Their last memories often tethered to unspoken conflicts. The atmosphere in the room became charged with anticipation as information began to flow. By dusk, Officer Chen sat with Lily, Rachel's roommate, across a cafeteria-style table crowded with empty coffee cups. "You said Rachel had been facing some threats," he prompted gently. Her brow furrowed, and she nodded slowly. She started receiving messages, veiled threats. People were unhappy with her activism on social media. They called her naive, delusional, she recounted, her voice faltering. But she wasn't afraid. She believed in making change. She often brushed it off as ignorance. The detective's mind raced. The threads of Rachel's life were beginning to intertwine, revealing an unsettling picture. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, Thompson understood that this early investigation was merely the first act in a play filled with intrigue and veiled intentions. The forces that had silenced Rachel would soon emerge, and she was determined to uncover the truth behind the smiling face captured in those photographs, a truth that would echo through Maplewood streets until it reached its inevitable crescendo. The dead ends. Days passed into a blur of interviews, meticulous notes, and cold leads. Detective Thompson felt the weight of each hour pressing against her chest like a leaden cloak, suffocating the conviction she wore at the onset of the investigation. Each name scribbled on the whiteboard in the precinct came with its own web of stories that somehow fizzled into inconclusive leads, like cigarettes extinguished before their time. As the initial flurry of publicity began to fade, Hobart, Rachel's on-again, off-again boyfriend, finally walked through the precinct doors, nervous and weather-worn. He looked every bit the part of a bewildered young man grappling with the unexpected loss. "We had a fight just days before," he admitted, his eyes cast to the floor. "She was passionate about her activism. I just wanted to keep her safe." Thompson noted the tension in Hobart's voice, the barely concealed blend of anguish and guilt. But further questioning soon revealed nothing of substance. It was an all too familiar pattern. Efforts to trace Rachel's online threats had led to a diverse set of anonymous accounts, a digital landscape littered with hate and vitriol, but none directly identifiable. Within the next few days, a promising lead emerged. They had found surveillance footage from a gas station near the park, capturing a figure resembling Rachel walking away from an argument with a stranger. Yet, the more they scrutinized the footage, the murkier the situation became. The video quality was inadequate, grainy, and factors like lighting and distance rendered it nearly impossible to confirm anything. Every promising trail turning colder than a winter's night. Worn down but undeterred, Thompson sat alone in her office long after the coffee machine had emptied. The only sound echoing through the dim room was the relentless tapping of her keyboard as she tried to piece together Rachel's last days. Each attempt felt more like constructing a facade, one that crumbled under the growing weight of her frustrations. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, she took a deep breath and stared at her whiteboard full of names and connections, her resolve unwavering. The case had grown frustratingly stagnant, but she knew that a break often sparked in the quietest moments. Rachel's story had yet to find its conclusion. The detective's heart pounded with each thought. Somewhere in the shadows was the truth, waiting to be unearthed. A break in the case. In the early hours of a crisp November morning, a breakthrough pierced the fog of uncertainty that had descended on the investigation like a heavy shroud. Detective Thompson sat sipping her coffee, exhaustion etching lines beneath her eyes, when Officer Chen burst into her office, flushed with a newfound energy. "Sarah, you're not going to believe this," he exclaimed, holding a folder tightly. "We received a call from a woman in town who believes she saw something suspicious the night Rachel was killed." She hesitated to come forward before, but something made her change her mind. Thompson's pulse quickened, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. Chen laid the details before her with eager precision. The caller, a local waitress named Clara, had been working a late shift at a diner close to the park, and described hearing Ray's voices outside. In a moment of clarity, she recognized one of them as Rachel's, vibrant and passionate even in distress. But what sent chills down his spine was what she claimed to have seen next to a tall figure moving rapidly towards the park, just after the commotion settled. Urgently, they arranged to meet Clara, who was clearly jittery, fidgeting with her hands as Thompson and Chen settled across from her in a booth at the diner. Her voice was shaky, but determination glinted in her eyes. "I didn't think much of it at first," she began. "But then I heard about Rachel. I knew I had to speak up. That night, it was dark, but I could make out a hooded figure." They looked, angry. As Clara recounted her memories, she described the man. Tall, with an imposing stature, and distinct ink etched visibly on his forearm, something vivid. In the glow of the diner's neon sign, the details began to align like pieces of a long-lost puzzle, leading Thompson to realize there had been an angry crowd at one of Rachel's previous activism events, with attendees that had openly criticized her, fueled by renewed adrenaline. The detective discovered that the same man had been spotted at several of Rachel's events, a local known for his volatile opinions on social justice issues. "We need to find him," Thompson said, her voice cutting through the din of the diner. As the interviews and evidence began flowing in, she could feel a shift in the tide. The threads of Rachel's life, once scattered, began weaving into a tighter, more damning narrative. This time, they wouldn't let the trail grow cold. The shadows loomed around Maplewood, but with this break, Thompson felt they were gaining momentum towards uncovering the truth behind Rachel's tragic demise. The suspect. With Clara's description fresh in mind, Detective Thompson and Officer Chen delved into the records of local activists and associates surrounding Rachel's cause. It didn't take long before they unearthed the name they had been searching for: Eric Dawson. Known for his aggressive protests against social justice movements, Dawson had made a name for himself in the community as a provocateur, his fiery rhetoric often igniting outrage instead of discourse. A quick check of police files revealed an arrest record filled with trespassing and disorderly conduct, each incident sparked by his disdain for what he termed liberal nonsense. For Thompson, it was a name that sent a cold shiver down her spine. He fit the profile of a man who could harbor enough anger to commit violence. With urgency in her step, Thompson arranged a meeting with her team to discuss their next moves. The tension in the room was palpable as they reviewed the details. Chen laid out Eric's known hangouts, a rundown bar called the Rusty Nail, where he regularly frequented with others who shared his beliefs. The place was a hive of discontent, filled with men and women embittered over perceived societal fit. Determined, Thompson and her team rolled up to the bar, its neon facade flickering in the gloomy dusk. As they entered, the chatter froze momentarily, a stillness gripping the air like anticipation before a storm. Eric was easy to spot, a tall figure, tattooed arms resting casually on the bar, as he exchanged some harsh words with a friend, laughter spilling from him like an oil slick. "Let's try to be discreet," Thompson instructed her team as they approached. She felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with caution. They were stepping into hostile territory. "Eric Dawson?" she said, her voice steady yet assertive. He turned slowly, an amused smile breaking across his face as if he found their presence entertaining. "What do you want?" he responded, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Thompson held her ground. "We have questions about Rachel Monroe's death. We know you were near Maplewood Park the night she was killed. Can you account for your whereabouts?" The amusement faded from Eric's face, replaced by a hardened glare. And the tension in the bar thickened, patrons flicking wary glances toward the ensuing conversation. Eric leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "Why would I waste my time on some progressive with a death wish? She got in over her head with those stupid protests." The statement lingered like smoke in the air as Thompson noted the dangerous edge in his tone. There was no denying the connection. The animosity was palpable. But they needed more. The words alone would not yield a conviction. As they left the bar, the weight of the conversation loomed over Thompson, heavy with implications. Eric Dawson personified the discomfort and rage behind Rachel's mission. In the pursuit of truth, they were inching closer, but the path ahead remained fraught with peril, and the shadows lurking in Maplewood felt more menacing than ever. The trial. The atmosphere in the Maplewood District Courthouse was electric as the trial of Eric Dawson commenced, drawing somber crowds eager for answers. The sleek marble floors and imposing columns that usually evoked a sense of justice now felt claustrophobic, a battleground etched with both grief and fury. It was a poignant moment, not just for the Turner family, but for the community that had watched so helplessly as the trial unfolded. As the weeks progressed, both Thompson and Officer Chen sat at the front, absorbing each testimony, meticulously crafted argument. And poignant emotion expressed from the witness stand. Prosecution painted a picture of Eric Dawson as a man driven by hostility and prone to violence, a reaction to what he viewed as the chaos of changing societal norms. Clara, the waitress who had initially alerted them to his potential involvement, recounted her night in vivid detail. She described seeing Dawson argue passionately against Rachel, a scorching exchange of ideologies that had ended in a shadowy threat echoing softly under the streetlights. But the defense countersued with a web of denial. Eric claimed he barely knew Rachel, framing himself as a scapegoat caught in the media frenzy. They presented witnesses who hurried to paint him as a misunderstood intellectual, twisting his shadows of anger into creative passion. "He's a passionate man, not a murderer," one former associate insisted, his words echoing like a haunting refrain, manipulating the jury's sentiments. The daily routines of court soon became familiar. Friends and family testified, recounting Rachel's zeal for life, her uplifting spirit, combating the shadows of injustice. Yet the weight of every emotional turn stung. Each moment, anchored down by the grief that shadowed her loss, the jury was hungry for clarity, the community restless for justice. As closing arguments approached, Thompson took a deep breath, her heart pounding as she leaned closer to hear the prosecution's final word. They focused not only on the cold facts, but on the vibrant legacy Rachel had left behind. They urged the jury to recognize Rachel not only as a victim, but as a symbol who stood against the tide of hate and division. Minutes stretched into hours as the jury deliberated, a storm of emotion swirling anxiously in the courtroom. Finally, the moment arrived. The foreman stood, his expression grave. In the case of the state versus Eric Dawson, we find the defendant, his voice faltered, as all held their breath. Guilty of second-degree murder. A murmur rose like an ocean tide, as disbelief and relief washed over the room. Tears streamed down Antona's face, a mixture of sorrow for her daughter and gratitude for the community fighting alongside her. In that moment, justice had prevailed. Not magnifying the horror. As Eric was handcuffed, Thompson felt the weight of a culmination filled with perseverance. Rachel's story had transcended her tragic end. He was now a call for change, a renewed push for justice that would resonate throughout the community. Maplewood's shadows would not disappear overnight, but glimmers of light began breaking through, illuminating paths toward healing in the wake of tragedy. The aftermath. The quiet that enveloped Maplewood in the wake of the trial was both a blessing and a curse. The verdict was delivered, yet the specter of Rachel Monroe's murder lingered, casting long shadows over the town. As the seasons shifted from autumn to winter, the community found itself irrevocably altered, grappling with the aftermath of the violence that had rocked their peaceful existence. For Ann Turner, the echo of courtroom proceedings haunted her dreams, intertwining sorrow over her daughter's loss with the appreciation of the wider movement Rachel's activism had inspired. He stood at a makeshift memorial in the park where Rachel's life had been tragically cut short, adorned with flowers and photographs of her smiling face. Each visitor to the memorial brought with them their own grief, gathering together to share stories that celebrated Rachel's passion and commitment to positive change. Detective Thompson, too, felt the weight of unresolved emotion. He found himself frequently visiting the park, her mind drawn to the details of the case that enveloped her. There was a bittersweet freedom in knowing justice had been served, yet the price paid lingered like an indelible mark upon the community. She yearned for healing but recognized the work ahead. The void left by Rachel's absence was immeasurable. Encouraged by Rachel's friends and allies, Anne decided to launch a community initiative to honor her daughter's legacy. The Rachel Monroe Project. It would provide a platform for young activists, fostering discussions around social justice, mental health, and community support. Anne was determined to fill the silence that had crept in, knowing that many young voices felt stifled by fear and the wake of Rachel's tragedy. As the project took shape, Thompson attended its first meeting, a vibrant gathering of young individuals who shared visions for a better world. Energized by Rachel's spirit, they exchanged ideas and desires. And Thompson felt the ripple of hope infuse the energy in the room. The determination to confront injustice head-on ignited warmth, despite the chill from the impending winter. Yet, even as new initiatives flourished, dark reminders of anger and division simmered beneath the surface. In stark contrast to the positivity within the project, a small group emerged, fueled by resentment and defiance towards the very causes Rachel had fought for. Yet rather than retreat, Anne, Thompson, and the passionate gathering of young activists stood firm, refusing to let fear dictate their journey on this path toward change. In the months that followed, as snow blanketed Maplewood, a resilient community unfurled, a community forever altered but not defeat. Conversations started in the heart of despair evolved into profound change, weaving a newfound narrative, one of strength derived from so many who came together. Undeterred, shoulder to shoulder against the shadows of the past, Rachel's story though mired in tragedy, ignited a fire that would illuminate the path forward, proving that even in loss, there is a possibility of rebuilding and renew. Reflection. As the last remnants of winter began to melt away, Ann Turner stood once again at the memorial site in Maplewood Park, the place where her daughter's vibrant spirit had been extinguished. The air was cool and crisp, yet carried the promise of spring. Flanked by blooming daffodils, Anne reflected on the tumultuous journey that had transpired over the past several months. Each flower symbolized resilience, bringing to mind the fractured yet healing community that was beginning to rise anew. In the quiet moments by the memorial, she found solace in the realization that Rachel's fight had sparked more than mere discussions. It had ignited a movement that reached beyond the boundaries of their small town. Young activists sprang forth like wildflowers, motivated not just by loss, but also by the desire to foster a world where voices like Rachel's could be heard and honored. And also thought about Detective Thompson, who had worked tirelessly not just as an investigator, but as a partner in amplifying Rachel's message.